Writing the script for this review was actually kind of funny. As most of you know, when I do my reviews, I dedicate an individual section of them to the features on the album, but I couldn't really do that with this project because 10 out of the 11 tracks here had features on them. So it looks like we're throwing it back to the style of reviews that I had last year, where I just went from the first track to the last track and just gave you my thoughts like that. Either way, welcome back to 10 Years Later, the segment where I talk about albums from the 2010s that were either impactful to me, impactful to music in general, very popular, or just worth revisiting 10 years later, be it for good or bad reasons. And admittedly, this was an album I was pretty interested in going back to. As you can tell from the title, the album we will be talking about today is the 2010 Rick Ross album, Teflon Don. Rick Ross, Mississippi-born rapper based in Florida. You guys probably know him pretty well. He has had a massive career in hip-hop since releasing his 2006 hit single, Hustlin. The man signed to Jay-Z's Def Jam Recordings label, and since then has released a bevy of successful studio albums. This one in particular was his fourth, and interestingly, his first one not to hit #1 on the Billboard 200. Yet despite that, it remains one of his most popular records, and in the eyes of many, apparently his best one. It's still his most critically acclaimed album. The record helped to establish Ross's Maybach Music label imprint, even if it wasn't the first Rick Ross album released under Maybach Music. And many still see this album as being Rick Ross's peak. Even though I hadn't previously listened to a full-length Rick Ross album before this one, I've enjoyed Rick Ross as a feature, and I was interested to see if this really was his peak. The album is 11 tracks and 49 minutes, so it's not the longest thing in the world. And what I found when returning to this album was a pretty enjoyable hip-hop record, filled with some energetic and fun performances and a lot of very cinematic production too. The intro track, I'm Not a Star, definitely has this very grandiose vibe that when you listen to it definitely screams 2010. It's flashy, it's loud, it's not a track that I personally love, but I do think Ross's gruff tone works on the song, and I could see this being a very good turn-up track. Freemason is another track that's definitely really lush and loud, but I do like the somewhat emotional feel of it. Ross sounds very confident here. I like some of John Legend's vocals on the song, and Jay-Z's verse is a huge high point. I like his ever-switching flows as he talks about rumors surrounding his association with the Illuminati, and the song as a whole is definitely a banger. Speaking of bangers, Tears of Joy is a No ID produced banger that once again carries this very cinematic feel to it. Ross's verses are pretty fantastic as they're filled with a lot of passion and some really clever bars, and CeeLo Green's chorus is great. His powerful vocals fit up very well against the punchy instrumentals. Despite being a somewhat long track at 5 minutes, I almost forgot it was 5 minutes because it didn't feel that long. It was very well paced. And then Maybach Music 3 features all of T.I., Jadakiss, and Erykah Badu, and it is yet another track that carries that cinematic feel to it. I love the almost jazzy and soulful feel of the instrumental, and the performances are very strong here too. T.I.'s flows and rhymes are very fun. Erykah Badu's hook is very beautifully sung, and Jadakiss comes through with a very hard performance that's as compelling as all the other features. And as for Rick Ross himself, his gruff energy remains strong on the track, and the beat switch before he comes in is pretty wonderful. It gives the song a more grand feel that works and adds another enjoyable layer to it. Live Fast Die Young is a more bouncier song featuring none other than Mr. Kanye West, who, I'm gonna be honest, drops a hook that isn't all that catchy to me. I was digging Ross's somewhat fast, more energetic flow on his verses, and Kanye's verse itself has some fun flows as he rides the beat very well, but his hook just doesn't feel all that exciting, and it's just not all that catchy to me. I don't know if I'd say it kills the song, but it does kind of hold it back from being one of my favorites here. Though, at the halfway point of the album, we have the track Super High featuring Neo, which feels like a bit of a smooth jam with some more soulful instrumentals. Ross's flow is bouncy as he rides the beat pretty much perfectly here, and honestly, one of the easiest ways to sell me on a song is to give me a clean Neo chorus, and in that regard, this song delivers. Neo kills it on the hook, and this is easily a personal standout for me on the album. The back end of the album for me is a little bit more of a mixed bag, and I think some of the lower points on the album come from this back half, but there are still some tracks here that I enjoy, like #1, which has guest spots from Trey Songz and Diddy. The instrumental on this one is really intense. It almost feels like a bit of a twerk anthem, I would say. Rick Ross sounds great on the song. He's loud without feeling like he's competing with the instrumental, and Diddy's flow matches the bounce of the instrumental. Trey Songz' chorus took some time to grow on me, and I do still wish he sounded on the chorus like he did on his verse, but it's definitely a fun track, and the energy of this one is damn near irresistible. Though the following track, MC Hammer featuring Gucci Mane, is lavish, but not one of the most exciting songs on the album. Rick Ross still brings his usual energy, but the slower flow doesn't feel as exciting, nor do some of his slightly dated lyrics. And the chorus is probably one of the weakest ones on the album for me. Gucci Mane's verse is also bland, and much of my enjoyment of the song only really comes from the chuckles I get about how 2010 this song sounds. Listen to it once and I think you'll know what I'm talking about. Then there's the big single B.M.F. Blowin' Money Fast featuring Styles P, which when it started, I almost thought this was the same song as MC Hammer, and I think that's why I wasn't as crazy about it. It feels repetitive being back to back with MC Hammer, and the lack of variance was a bit of a disappointment. And I know that it came from another EP, so I shouldn't be too hard on it, but outside of being bombastic, it's just not all that exciting. It's got a cool Styles P verse though, so at least there's that. Though one of the biggest highlights on the album for me is Aston Martin music featuring Drake and Chrisette Michele. The song is lighter than pretty much anything else on here, carrying more of an R&B vibe to it, but I do like that about it though. Chrisette Michele kills it on the chorus. Ross sounds surprisingly really good over the lighter instrumentals, and of course Drake's light crooning on the song sounds really nice, making this easily a high point on the album. And then to top the record off, the closer All the Money in the World features Raphael Saadiq, and it's another more vibrant and grand song with some pretty loud horns, though I'm not crazy about how similar the beat feels to a number of the other tracks on here, and I think the chorus is one of the least memorable ones on the album. Ross's faster flows are still catchy. Raphael Saadiq has some decent, smooth vocals on his verse, but I feel like this wasn't the strongest choice for a closer. I personally would have went with Aston Martin music to finish up the album. But overall, Rick Ross's 2010 opus, if you want to call it that, is still a very solid listen. Ross might not be the deepest or most interesting lyricist in the world, but with this record, I can commend the man's ear for catchy cinematic production, and the fact that he can make up for his lyrical shortcomings with some energetic performances. His flows are regularly really solid, and he also can get a lot of mileage out of his star-studded lineup of features. Pretty much most, if not all, of the guest artists here are in top form, and even if some of the songs on the album just scream 2010 in terms of how they sound and some of the effects on them, they're still pretty enjoyable listens. I'll say the one thing that would have really set this album off for me was a little bit more variance in terms of production. Some of the songs did start to feel a bit samey to me as we got to the back end, and I did mention that the back-to-back combo of MC Hammer and B.M.F. Blowin' Money Fast did also set the album back a little bit, and given the variety of featured artists, I would have liked to see Ross try to do a little bit more experimenting here, but even so, I can see why people consider this such a good album. And in the end, there's plenty of bangers and enjoyable tracks that I'm sure I'll continue to come back to in the future. Back in 2010, I'm not sure I would have fallen in love with this album, even though I was just dipping my toes into the world of hip-hop thanks to the likes of Eminem. I don't think I would have been well-versed enough to really appreciate this album. Listening to it now, though, I definitely really enjoyed my time with it, and even though I had previously enjoyed Ross a lot as a feature, now I feel like I can appreciate him more as a solo artist as well. If I had to put a rating on it, I would probably say this album would get a good rating from me. It's not the most compelling thing ever, and it can be a little inconsistent at points, but I can see how this continues to stand tall in Ross's discography, and it definitely remains a very enjoyable project a decade later. But that's just my opinion on this album. What did you guys think about it? Did you listen to it then? Do you listen to it now? Did you love it then? Hate it then? Do you love it now? Hate it now? And for those of you that listen to Rick Ross more than I do you agree that this is his best album? Or is there another Rick Ross album that everyone's sleeping on? Whatever your thoughts are, leave them down in the comments section. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I won't beg you for it. As for what's next, looking at my list, the album that I'm going to be looking at will be Mike Posner's album, 31 Minutes to Take Off. I don't even know if I'll like it or not, but man, I just love doing videos in this series and reminding you guys that certain artists existed. So stay tuned for that, but until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.